We are here to celebrate the wonderful life of Swami Atmatattwananda. He was a person of infinite love, and he left his body on the day Radha Ashtami, which in Indian spiritual tradition is the expression of the highest love for all God in all. And his name was also Shiva. He had the characteristic of Shiva. He is the friend of all who are having in difficulties and suffering without condition. He lived a wonderful life, a monastic life. It's a great joy that he lived this body, keeping that higher values of spirituality, that love, unconditional love for all, and led a pure life till the end of his last days. Glory to God. I will read today from few verses of the Katha Upanishad talking about the immortality of the soul and the purity of the reality. Om Tvang Durdarsham Gurhamanuprabishtham Guhahitam Gauharishtam Puranam Adhyatma Yogadhigamena Devam Matvadhiro Harshasaku Jahati. The wise man gives up both joy and sorrow, having realized by means of meditation on the inner self, that ancient effulgent one who is so hard to see, who is subtle, immanent, and is seated in the heart and resident in the body. Anoraniyan mahato mahiyan atma sajanto nihito guhayam tamakratu pashyati bita shoko dhatu prasadat mahimanam atmanam. The soul smaller than the smallest and greater than the greatest, dwells in the hearts of all beings. The desireless one, being free from grief, realizes the glory of the soul through the purity of his senses and mind. Atmanang rathinang viddhi sharirang rathamevatu buddhin tusharating viddhi mana pragrahamevacha indriyani hayannahur vishayang steshu gocharan atmendriyo manojuktam bhakti ityahur manishina. Know that the soul is the master of the chariot, sitting within it, and the body the chariot. Consider the intellect as the charioteer, and the mind as the reins. The senses are the horses, and the sense objects are the roads. The wise call the soul the enjoyer when it is united with the body, senses, and the mind. Esha sarveshu bhuteshu Gurha atmana prakashate dishyate tu agraya buddhya suksmaya suksmadarsivi. Your soul is hidden in all beings and is not revealed to all. It is seen only by the men of deep insight through their pointed and subtle intellect. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to you all, dear friends and devotees, our interfaith friends, and all of you. Welcome. Thank you.
I will read a few verses from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that speaks about the great doctrine of the atman, the self. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuya ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano nahanyate hanyamane sharire. Never is this one born, and never does it die. Nor is it that having coming to exist, it will ever cease to be. This self is birthless, permanent, eternal, primeval. It is not killed when the body is killed. Veda vinashinam nityam yaenam ajamavyayam katam sa purusha partha kam ghatayati hantikam. O Arjuna, one who knows this Atman as indestructible, eternal, beyond birth, and imperishable, how and whom does that person kill? Or whom does he cause to be killed? Vasansi jirnani yata vihaya navani ghrnati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnan anyati sanyati navani dehi. As a person casts off worn-out garments and puts on newer garments, so does the self cast off worn-out bodies and enters into others that are new. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha, nachainam kledayantyapo, nashoshayati marutaha. Weapons do not cleave the self. Fire does not burn. Water does not make it wet, nor does the wind make it dry. Achedyoyam adayoyam akledyo shosha evacha nitya sarvagata sthanu rachaloyam sanatana. This self cannot be cut, it cannot be burned, cannot be moistened, and surely cannot be dried. It is eternal, all-pervading, stationary, unmoving, and changeless. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmada pariharyerte natvam sochitum arhati. The Lord now comes down a notch lower and speaks about the existential truths. Whatever is born is sure to die, and whatever dies is sure to be reborn. Therefore, you should not grieve for what is inevitable. Dehi nityam avadhyoyam dehe sarvasya bharata tasmat sarvani bhutani natvam sochitum arhasi. The self that dwells in the bodies of all can never die. Therefore, thou shouldst not grieve for anyone. This is the doctrine which has changed the course of metaphysics and which is an ancient doctrine. Swami Vivekananda, when he addressed the Chicago Parliament of Religions in 1893, he says, I thank you in the name of the most ancient order of monks in the world. Swami Atmatattwananda was, to our great fortune and his great fortune, a part of the tradition of that ancient order of monks in the world. And the monk, before he becomes a monk, has to die to the world. So symbolically, a person goes through a ritual where he performs his own funeral rites and finishes all the other duties to the world. The body is a microcosm of the world. This body now is dead. A monk's body is dead, but the monk's mind is alive to the reality which is called Brahman. That is how a monk lives And that's how the monk finally cast off his body. And today, we have in our minds and our hearts our dear elder brother, Swami Atmatattwananda. What more can anyone ask for this? He blessed us with his life and his thoughts and his gaiety and his great enthusiasm for everybody. His heart was truly broad. And I used to wonder what made him so emotional, even about the smallest thing. I used to see tears rolling down his eyes, even when he saw a flower or an ant crawling down on the... I said, why? But that is a monk. He lives the life of everyone. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Reading from the Office of the Dead. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord, and he that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Let us now feel the presence of Swami Atmatattwananda, Shiva, or Doug, however you knew him, in him who dwells in all beings, and in whom all being dwells. How desolate is the city, how lonely is the household now. The fountain has dried up, the lamp is extinguished, our fire has gone out, and the ashes are scattered upon the hearth. For now the hand of the potter has shattered the vessel that he made. He has covered the face of our beloved and hidden it with a veil. Infinite time has received the hurrying soul, and our love cries out in vain to stay the hand of death. In our gardens the flowers have withered and the birds have lost their song. The stars are overcast because your eyes have lost their sight and your feet will never be heard upon the threshold. You were with us, and now you have left us alone. Hear now, beloved, hear once more before you start upon your journey our salutations and farewell. Forgive us now for all you suffered, the pain and the loneliness. Forgive all our anger and impatient thoughts. Forgive us for every failure to love and for every failure to express our love. Forgive us for all you lacked in life and for all you lack in death. Forgive us for the labor that left you weary and for the love that failed to comfort you. Forgive. Let us now tenderly remember all the days of your past. Let us not forget any act you did that was helpful and generous, kind, courageous, and selfless. It is wonderful indeed to remember the journey that we made together. You are very holy to us now in the presence of death. Know now how much we love you. Until we too are wrapped in death, may we never forget to send you our constant aid through love and prayer. Know that love is stronger than death. Many waters cannot quench it, nor can the floods overwhelm it. Your hand is not unclasped from our hands, nor has your name vanished from the life of our hearts. Of this be certain, our longing and the strength of our love cannot fail to reach you and give you strength under God's will here and hereafter. Rest now, dear one, and be at peace. Then wake, arise, and share our prayers now and in the hour of death and forevermore. Go now and be made one with the company of the saints. Leave all your imperfections behind you and know fulfillment of your heart's desire. May the gods of high heaven be your protectors on the path that you tread before us. May the gods of high heaven be your protectors in the dwellings of the righteous. Go forth now like a happy traveler to distant lands and lands more distant. Onward from light to light, from glory to glory. Go forth by those same paths trodden by men of old, the paths that all must tread, each child of woman according to his deeds. For death is certain for the born, rebirth is certain for the dead, but the indwelling God can never be destroyed. Bodies are said to die, but that which possesses the body is eternal. That reality which pervades the universe is indestructible. No one has the power to change the changeless. O great and mighty dead, O happy dead, for unnumbered ages the world has been weeping for its dead. But weep not for the dead, weep rather for the living, for they have yet to die. Worn-out garments are shed by the body. Worn-out bodies are shed by the dweller within the body. New bodies are donned by the dweller like garments. When we consider that which is past and that which we shall come, and that which shall come hereafter, we see how men reach their end in the ripeness of time, like the harvests of the fields. We see how they come forth again as the harvest comes forth. O terrible dark night, O night of delusion, O night of death, to you also our salutations. We salute you, we salute you. It's wonderful to see so many interfaith friends with us today. And we'll begin our tributes and reminiscences, and I believe Swami Mahayogananda has a list of people that he'll call on. While he's getting ready, I'll just take a moment to say that I first knew him when my mother pointed him out when I was about 5. tall, smiling figure out in front of the temple. Who's that? Well, that's Douglas. He doesn't talk much. In those days, he didn't talk much. But that changed. And we shared a lot of interests. We shared our interest in flowers and astronomy and music. And we went to India for our final vows together. I think it was a nice partnership. I helped him in anything practical, which he always kind of found it challenging. And he handled all the social graces and kept the conversations going when I would have been lost for words. So, Swami, are you ready to call our first speaker?
We hope so. We're piping in Swami Sarvapriyananda.
Yeah, he's already here.
We're piping in Swami Sarvapriyananda from the New York, and we're going to do our best to make this work. Let me see if the audio is working. Speak. Maharaj, okay, give us a moment. We can hear you, but
Yes.
YouTube also needs to hear you. Can you? Okay, we're going to switch now.
I offer my pranams to revered Swami Sarvadevananda ji, and pranams and namaskars to all the other revered monks, nuns, other monastic members and devotees, and all those who have gathered here physically in person, and also the virtual audience. Shiva is virtually the first person you get to meet when you come to Hollywood. And that was so for me too. The first time I came in LAX, he was there with others to receive me, a monk who was born long after he became a monk. So that was the first thing which struck me about Shiva Maharaj, was that how he could make friends with anybody and everybody. Usually, we are restricted to we restrict ourselves to our own generation, maybe one or two generations before us and after us. But I noticed that Shiva Maharaj was equally comfortable with the elderly, with the middle-aged, with teenagers, with children. The constant stream of visitors who would come to the Vedanta Society in Hollywood, they would meet Shiva Maharaj, who would come forward, make friends with you, ask about your comfort, feed you, and ask about you. He took a personal interest. Though I noticed the personal interest was always for a spiritual purpose. He would want to talk about God, about spirituality. He had friends all over. It didn't matter where you are from, whether you are from America or India, or indeed the Amazon rainforest. And I mean that literally, because one of the last friends he made was a person from the Amazon rainforest, an activist who was trying to save the rainforest. That was another thing about Shiva Maharaj, his love of good causes. So his tendency to help people, it was a passion for him. It could be the homeless person outside, he would bring him in for a hot meal, or it could be huge global causes like saving the Amazon rainforest, the environment, establishing harmony among religions. We all know that he was passionately committed to the World Parliament of Religions. And the World Parliament of Religions community knows Shiva Maharaj very well for decades now. And he made it a point to attend all of the world's parliaments of religion, which were held in the last 2-3 decades. His enthusiasm, he was a volcano of energy. He sort of radiated enthusiasm and energy. He loved to talk, and all of us, we know that. I always joked, that Shiva Maharaj's love extended to everybody, but it was just a little less if you were a talkative person. So He loved to talk. I remember once I went on a trip with him to Santa Barbara. In the car, he talked non-stop until he fell asleep. And then he awoke. There was a silence in the car for a while. And suddenly Shiva Maharaj awoke with a start. And he started off exactly where he had left off. And the remarkable thing about Shiva Maharaj was that he was not at all predictable, as much as he loved to talk, so remarkable were his silences. I have seen him just about every day in the temple. I have seen him on occasion other places, in Trabuco, in Santa Barbara. When he would withdraw into a meditative silence, it was deeply, deeply silent. He was deeply inward at that time. In fact, all around would reign a silence around him. It was quite remarkable. Another thing that I noticed about him was that his compassion for the suffering. If someone was hungry, he would call that person in for a hot meal, sometimes to the exasperation of the cooks. If someone was homeless, especially I knew he was troubled by the growing homelessness situation in Los Angeles. He really suffered. He felt deeply the suffering of the homeless, and he tried to help them as much as he could. His compassion extended to anybody and everybody. If you had some suffering in your life, I have seen him stand up for those who had nobody else to stand up for them. The weak, the ill, the mentally ill, the homeless, the poor, people whom others disliked. So he was always there. Shiva Maharaj always stood up for you. One thing I just want to say is that in all of this, he was vastly learned and vastly well-read. He was a Yale man, Ivy League person, and he was very proud of being a Yale man. And the funny thing was, he sort of made me one of his little projects, of which he had many. And he wanted me to go to an Ivy League university. Why would you send a Swami to a university? That was a strange thing. But with Shiva Maharaj, you never know. What he thought and what seemed eccentric to us, what seemed strange to us, would turn out to be a real, because Shiva Maharaj thought about it. And lo and behold, I did get a fellowship to Harvard 2 years ago. And the first thing I thought was, well, Shiva Maharaj wanted me to go to university. Though I don't think he took it very kindly, because he didn't like Harvard at all. Because being a Yale man, he wanted me to go to Yale. Actually, he came once to New York, and he had breakfast and lunch with me, and he was sort of cajoling me to go with him to Yale. I didn't at that time. His life, I noticed one thing in the midst of this tremendous flurry of activities, flurry of any good cause, he was there to be a part of it. And yet, at the end of the day, like the compass needle which Sri Ramakrishna talks about, he says that if there's a compass needle, if you spin the needle around, it will swing around and point back to the north-south direction. And the mind of a spiritual seeker, of a sadhu, should be like that. Wherever it goes, ultimately it swings back to God. And that was Shiva Maharaj. That I always noticed. In the midst of 100 different interests, hundreds of friends, so many causes, good causes which he was supporting and involved in, his mind always swung back. At the end of the day, it was his guru, Swami P. He loved Swami Brahmananda. He would often speak of Swami Brahmananda and Thakur Ma and Swamiji. So just like that proverbial needle of the compass, his mind, which ranged all over the world, would swing back almost naturally by itself to God, to Guru, to his devotion, love of God at the end of the day, and I'm sure at the end of life too. I pray to Thakur Ma and Swamiji to bless Shiva Maharaj, to accept him in their midst, and to bless all of us. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Hello. Well, I have it written out, so I'm going to read it to be on track. To me, he was my Swami, my Doug Blue. Doug is like a droplet in the water that ripples out and touches everything. He influenced and touched every part of our lives. He is family, he is brother. He was like a father to me, which I did not realize until he died. Steve, myself, our children, and Fanta, Hartwell, Van, and Arbella adored and loved him. Long ago, Steve wore his jacket. He embroidered God in many languages. Steve said the right person will know it when they see it. The day it was recognized was in Hollywood in the Greater Antilles health food store in the 70s. That person was Doug, and Steve's jacket brought us together. Doug found our home in Hollywood by introducing us to the Willets, who are lifetime friends. He found Steve an amazing job as a scenic artist in the film industry and shared with us his love of anthropology, the search for Bigfoot with anthropologists to do research in Northern California and Oregon for weeks, which was exciting and dangerous. We learned to camp, rough it, and travel minimally through Doug. He always encouraged us into the light and suggested that we pray and meditate in the same place. He encouraged us to take care of our bodies, our temple, and always entertained us tirelessly with stories and jokes. His mind was the sharpest I've ever seen. His love was unconditional, and I think the first time I ever heard that term was from him, unconditional love. His love of history and genetics was inspiring, and he would come to Kentucky to do research often, which led him to the discovery that we were actually related through blood. I saw the copy of that, and it was in his room, which I'm sure is gone now, but lives in history and can still be found. He loved floating in the Kentucky River. He loved the sun. Doug invited our son, Van, to stay at Vedanta to learn their ways. Van loved Doug's kindness. Doug was a welcome mat to life, and he never knew a stranger. He was great support to our daughters, Fanta and Hart, when they lived in LA. And when our son moved his family to Pasadena, he was a huge part of their lives. When Andon moved to Texas and was in the process of moving his family to Mexico, he flew in first class for a visit. And Doug said that was the first time he had ever flown first class. When Andon and B&A were married in Kentucky, we flew Doug out to participate in the reception in the vineyard. Doug said the only thing missing is a rainbow. And seconds later, we heard shouts from outside, and everyone ran out to see a double rainbow. It was quite a rainbow show, and everyone looked at Doug and smiled. Doug participated in the blessing of Andon and B&A's children, Avian and Camilla, at Vedanta. It was beautiful. I can hear his words. Gone to glory. Jaimal. Goodbye was not in his vocabulary. Long story short, I missed my Dougie. I missed my Swami. I missed my breakfast at Vedanta with Doug. I missed walking in his garden. I missed his stained clothes and his bird bathroom messes. I missed telling him, if you do not eat the rest of the food, I'll give it to the dogs. And he would say, oh, sister. And then he would eat the rest. I miss our photography and the 3D photos. I miss seeing the world through his eyes. I miss his light. We miss him deeply. We love our Dougie and our Swami. Thank you. Thank you. Are we ready? Okay. Good morning. I bring condolences from the Givord Center, Religion Inside Out, to our friends at Vedanta, from our board of directors and our advisory council and our entire staff. I come this morning to honor and to remember a life that has touched all of us profoundly. When I thought about Swami Shiva, I realized
that in all of the years of the Board Center and of our meaningful relationship with Vedanta, Swami Shiva never did an event. He never gave a lecture. He never did a presentation. He never even processed in. So why am I here? Because he impacted us profoundly in the way that he lived. Science in the last few decades has come to recognize what Vivekananda and Ananda and spiritual teachers have known for thousands of years, which is we are resonant beings. We vibrate with one another. And Swami Shiva was a being who filled us with joy. We gathered together to remember, because remembering means literally to put back together again, to weave back together again. And when we think of Swami Shiva for a moment, what do we think of? We think of that halo of silver hair. We think of that twinkle in his eye, and we think of that amazing smile that touches our hearts and our souls. Swami's gift to us was his capacity for joy. It is the great French theologian who says, joy is the most infallible sign of the presence of God. We don't have to be on the podium to change the world. We simply have to be filled with joy. Om Shanti, Shanti.
My goodness. Only Shiva would get me up here. And Andre Van Ziel. My name is Quincy Coleman. I am so honored and have so much joy to celebrate our brother, Shiva, and his presence is so here and sparkling. On behalf of one of Shiva's beloved brothers, Andre Van Ziel, I offer this message. And I might need glasses for the first time in my life. Thank you. How can I serve? Shiva's joyous voice when he answered the phone at the monastery resounds so clearly now and epitomizes his extraordinary fullness of being that touched us all so very deeply. It seems fitting that at this time of celebrating Shiva's life, that Deborah and I are on the East Coast awaiting the birth of our first grandchild. Shiva's presence in our family life was pivotal. He was, and still is, an important part of the fabric of our children's lives, as they have known him most of their lives. He was always a champion for our spiritual well-being, and we had many wonderful adventures together, including camping and other outings in nature. I feel moved to share his passion and commitment to interfaith in general, and the World Parliament of Religions in particular. He was involved in its inception in Chicago so many years ago. My wife, Reverend Deborah, and I worked with him as close friends, colleagues, and as co-members of the board of the Southern California Committee for the Parliament of World's Religions. And more recently, in its new iteration, with the board committed to what Shiva deeply encouraged, honoring Swami Vivekananda, that of a mystically oriented transformational change in the world. Deborah co-chairing with Reverend Dr. Richard Rose. Shiva was a personal mentor and served our family in many times of personal crisis, going way above and beyond, the call to respond to those in suffering. He responded in this passionately practical and applied mysticism, seeing the Brahman in another form through all the many lives he touched and transformed. An example of his rare consciousness is revealed in his repeated refrain of, "I love you, I love you, I love you," holding up his hand in blessing as he was being kicked in the head and brutally beaten in a mugging. He wore a cartoon mask to spare people the sight of his bruised and cut features. This is just a very tiny glimpse of the cosmic soul that graced us in the form of Shiva. I end with this very personal testimony. Being alone with Swami in the room when he chose to escape the bonds of earth and fly home to the mother, then being part of the sacred process of preparing his body for the mortuary, personally shaving his head and face, witnessing his brother monks bathing and clothing him in the garbs of his monastic station, and scattering flowers all over his beautiful and so fragile form, was both a rare benediction and holy privilege to be a part of. I kept on having visions of the Pietà, the body taken down from the cross, chanting from the 8th chapter of the Gita, repeating the refrain, Hari Om Ramakrishna, Hari Om Ramakrishna, Hari Om Ramakrishna. Then entering the quiet of meditation in his body's presence and with his small band of monastic brothers. All this has led me to a deep heart opening with joy-filled sorrow and celebration of his unique and wondrous spirit. His gift of taking us on excursions from here to there by any means other than obvious, his sense of sacred glee, his songs and words of wild wonder at the beauty and truth of Brahman in another form. When Deborah last spoke to him about a month ago, he whispered, "Keep climbing the mountain. Keep climbing the mountain, sister." His message to us present would be, I am certain, keep climbing the mountain. This has all led me to create this poem. All is gratitude and wonder, with a quiet and almost shy joy, beneath a flowing river of loss of youth, loss of power, loss of friends, loss of enemies, loss of the habitats of fond memory, loss of wildness and mad exuberance, dancing to the beat of mother's heart. So, being young in an ancient body, I dance with exquisitely small steps, small bows, and sacred gestures, signing holy words to the blind, singing hymns to the deaf, shouting joy into the screeching storm, shining a spasm of light into the darkness, a semaphore of hope, an emergency flare of divine assurance upon wild seas. Hari Om Ramakrishna. With deep love from Deborah, Jared, Serena, and Andre Van Ziel. Climbing the mountain.
Thanks to Andre Van Ziel and to Quincy for reading it so beautifully. I now invite Ruth Broyd Sharon to offer her thoughts and song. She will be followed by Patrick Horn. We have a good mic for your song.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Speaking is from that one song.
Okay. Okay. Shiva never liked it when we discussed him. We didn't want to be talked about. So I'm not going to talk about him. I'm going to talk to him right now. Shiva, Shiva, Shiva. A paragon of brilliance and an elf. That's who you were. A person of literally perambulating blessing to me, to my children, to our interfaith community, and whoever you met. You were so devoted to the Parliament, and you, through our work in our local Parliament group, we came to understand Vivekananda and the Vedanta Society, and to cherish it, and to actually be in touch with Vivekananda's teachings in a visceral way. And many of us, when we had challenges in our organization and when we felt that we were stymied or paralyzed, we would come back to our compass north, which was Vivekananda's teachings and the reason for the Parliament. I remember when I arranged for Shiva, you came to Guadalajara and you entranced everybody. You made friends with all the Mexicans at the conference and all the indigenous people, and then in the evenings you remember how we would sit and debrief at the local cafe, and you would tell us in your Irish brogue jokes about the McFerrin brothers, the twins, and it was always with you, from the ridiculous to the sublime, and thank God for that. When we tried to bring up something troubling with you, you would always raise your hand and say, "No, sister, I don't want to hear about it." And we would have to work out the details. But it didn't matter, because you always had your eye on the prize, Shiva, wherever you were. You knew that to live in a world of peaceful coexistence, what we would have to give up ourselves. You were a great cheerleader. You would call people suddenly in the middle of the day and say, "I just want you to know what you're doing is wonderful. Thank you. I love you." And then hang up. Do you remember that? How many of you had calls like that? When I released the first album for my musical, you were ecstatic because you loved music and the arts. And so you were getting all these albums to give to your friends. You were singing the songs. You understood that those of us who were involved in the arts, we had a special way to reach people and to reach their hearts through music. And you did that so well with your guitar and with your amazing songs from the South, bluegrass and whatever else you had up your sleeve. I want to reiterate what was in Andre's letter in order to finish talking about you, Shiva, because more than anything else, I remember when you would come to the phone and you would say, "How can I serve?" And it occurred to me that if every person in the world arose in the morning with that question on their lips, we would have the world that we dream of having. And you made that thought possible, Shiva. For which I thank you deeply. And I'm going to sing a song that actually our talented Quincy Coleman recorded for me in the studio. But I was requested to sing it a cappella because it would be more direct from me. This is a song called "When It's Time for Me to Go." And it was written about 4 months ago when all of us were experiencing the death of loved ones and watching people around us die and trying to make sense of us and maybe even coming to terms with our own mortality. And today, as I praise you, Shiva, I'm hoping that you've been there to welcome our beloved Joseph Prabhu, who just died yesterday, who was co-chair of the Parliament. So Shiva, this song now is for you. May it go directly into your heart. When it's time for me to go, don't mourn for me. Let me rise, let me soar, let me fly. When it's time for me to go, don't cry for me, for it's just fare thee well, not goodbye. When it's time for me to go, don't hold me back. We will meet once again as before. When it's time for me to go, I want you to know I will love you forevermore. Death is cruel. People say it will take you away from the ones who love you the most. It may come any time without reason or rhyme. We won't even know when it's close. When it's time for me to go, don't grieve for me. Set me down, set me loose, set me free. When it's time for me to go, don't weep for me. It's my time, it's my soul's destiny. When it's time for me to go, don't hold me back. I'm being called to my celestial home. When it's time for me to go, I want you to know you'll never be alone. Death is cruel, people say. It will take you away from the ones who love you the most. It can come any time without reason or rhyme. We won't even know when it's close. When it's time for me to go, don't mourn for me. Let me rise, let me soar, let me fly. When it's time for me to go, don't cry for me, for it's just fare thee well, not goodbye. Rest in peace, Shiva. Alecha hashalom. Alecha hashalom. Alecha hashalom.
Om Namaskar. I'm Patrick Horn, and I first met Shiva as the jolly good fellow in the choir. And I knew immediately that he was one of the great characters of Western civilization and world history. He came out to see my band play on Hollywood Boulevard, and he was so delighted. And after I was having an ordeal and personal experiences, he listened compassionately. He understood, and he gave me right guidance. He pointed me to the Swamis, get initiation. He pointed me to the interfaith leaders. Climbing the mountain wasn't just a metaphor. We climbed Mount Baldy together with hundreds of people in the interfaith movement. We were nature mystics together. He would call me up and say, "There's a super bloom in the desert. You will understand, let's go." And we went. And even on this trip, his love of Bigfoot, we find a giant statue and he's there with his camera, taking pictures of it in awe. We found Bigfoot together. Working in the interfaith community on water conservation, on the Rainforest Initiative, for World Interfaith Harmony Week, mobilizing for 1 trillion trees. He would say, "Why talk when we can sing?" And when we would sit here in the chapel, reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and he would give his anecdotes, he would burst into song. "On the day I was born, said my father, said he, I've an elegant legacy waiting for ye. 'Tis a rhyme for your lips and a song for your heart, to sing it whenever the world falls apart. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow it over the hill and the stream. Look, look, look to the rainbow, follow the fellow who follows a dream. Follow the fellow, follow the fellow, follow the fellow who follows a dream. For he's a jolly good fellow. For he's a jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny. Keep climbing the mountain."
I'm here to read out the message from Swami Atmatattwananda, who was in San Diego for many years. But first I would like to say to Shiva, thank you, Shiva, for showering your affection and attention on everyone and making us all feel special, making us feel like we matter. And the little ways you did that, like when I would help you with your computer, and we people who know computers, we sometimes get impatient with people who don't get computers. But you would make I would come over and it would be like such a simple thing. I just, do 1 or 2 things, and in 20 seconds or 10 seconds it would be done, and you'd say, "He's a genius. He just comes and he just barely touches it and it works." So that's the way you would make me feel special and make me feel thanked. Or when you would tell these jokes and I would laugh. You had a lot of good jokes. And then you would catch my eye and you would smile and you'd say, "Oh, that makes my day." Like it was that I would laugh at your joke that made telling the joke worth all the trouble. So thank you for all those times that you made me feel special, and all those times you made all of us feel special. Swami Atmatattwananda. Anyone who was acquainted with Shiva, even briefly, could not possibly not recognize him as someone very special at the Hollywood Monastery. That was the impression I had of him while I was in San Diego for about 8 years. His warm welcome and smile, ever ready to greet one and all, would make you feel at home quickly. His always busy movements would make you wonder about his next important task at hand. But I shall always remember him for another incident of quite a personal nature. He was the first person in this country who received me so warmly at my arrival from Belur Mutt. It was a cold morning at LAX in the first week of February 2000 that I arrived from Belur Math via Singapore and Tokyo. I was new to everything from long-distance international flights to landing in a totally new world. I had no idea about what to expect next. At least, I was unprepared for a sudden impromptu reception. After immigration clearance and after baggage collection, as I emerged from the airport lounge to the general area where a crowd of friends and family members of arriving travelers had gathered, I heard clearly, "Welcome, Swami." With a disbelief to my own ears, I looked around and saw a lean and tall gentleman waving at me with a wide smile on his face. Later, I learned he was my monastic brother Shiva, who could spot me from my ochre cloth the moment I appeared there, and decided to greet me then and there, rather than after a formal introduction by Swami Sarvadevananji Maharaj, who was also there. I met Jnana also there for the first time. His kind heart always bled for the poor and helpless people. I have my first-hand story on that, as I am sure many of you do as well. But his willingness to serve did not limit itself to destitute and poor. Anyone in need of anything could find a benefactor in him. That became clear to me through an interesting incident. Once I saw him watching with another devotee a baseball game on TV. As a person arriving fresh from India, I had some knowledge about the game of cricket, but I could not understand much about this new game, baseball, that had some apparent similarity with cricket. So I asked him later if he could tell me more about the basics of baseball so that I could also enjoy watching it. I received a generous gift next day from him. He had bought the latest baseball rule book for me. I shall remember Shiva very fondly for a long time. May Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother Sarala Devi receive their wonderful child back home is my sincere prayer. And now Swami Chit Brahmananda will read reminiscence from Swami Chidekananda.
I'm really glad actually to have this opportunity. I didn't know Shiva that well. I met him here at the monastery when I was posted here 8 years ago, and never really had the opportunity to deeply interact with him. I have to tell you the truth. I didn't know where to put Shiva. He was such an astounding, powerful presence of personality. And to hear your reminiscences and to see how he touched so many people makes me very glad. It's grown in me a deeper respect and a lovely appreciation. I have here two reminiscences, one from Swami Chidekananda, whom we might know as Deepak Maharaj. He says, "Revered Maharaj touched the hearts of hundreds of people. He was especially a sanctuary for anybody, monks, devotees, but especially for the lower strata of society, like the poor, the drug addicts, the downtrodden, etc. People who were struggling to make their life better. When Shiva was younger, he would sometimes go out the entire day and even nights into the poor, dangerous communities around Hollywood and try to help them. On one occasion, during the visit of the then General Secretary, Most Revered Swami Smarananandaji Maharaj in the year 2000, he was returning past midnight to the Hollywood ashrama. Hollywood is especially dangerous at night, and that night, as Shiva Maharaj was walking, he was suddenly accosted by someone who demanded money from him. Shiva Maharaj then calmly explained to the thief that he was a monk. He had no money. Suddenly the thief took out a bottle and smashed it on the head of Shiva Maharaj, and he fell and landed on his head on the sidewalk. 2 teeth were knocked out and blood was gushing from his head. But as a result of the fall, Shiva Maharaj lost 1 or 2 teeth, and later he was diagnosed with a hematoma. But nonetheless, right as he fell, knocked to the ground, he sprang to his feet immediately, crying out, "Brother, I love you. Brother, I love you." Revered Swami Swahanandaji, then head of the Hollywood Vedanta Society, was very impressed by this. He used to tell others in a light-hearted and yet serious manner, "It's too bad for Shiva Maharaj that our organization does not recognize saints when they're still living. Otherwise, he would be recognized. To be assaulted, to fall down, and then without time to think or reason, let alone forgive, to stand up and tell the robber that he loves him. This is the mark of a saint." Our friend Anthony Kornarens writes, "Shiva was a dear friend and a spiritual guide. Toward the end of his body, he started taking the form of light. In one recent visit, he told me that his bed had become a shrine, that he felt Shiva close to him and the deity was on his lips. He was very lucid in those moments, and the divine in him was palpable. He always inspired me, but never more than in that moment. In his presence, I felt far beyond time, beyond dimension, and beyond the apparent world that Shiva always challenged."
Myron Goldsby.
Hello, everybody. We're really here to celebrate someone special and to show a little bit insight of a personality of Shiva that you don't get to see. I figured that I'll tell you a few stories that happened here. And Shiva was a humorist. He loved to see people smile. He knew that when we're laughing and smiling, that God's with us. So one day, Shiva decided that he was going to go back east. And he wanted me as his driver to the airport, which I gladly went ahead and took up on him. And as a joke, we would always tell our brothers, let's get some money so we can give to Shiva so he can stay longer. And that was a true format, but it was in humor. Now, one of our Swamis came over to the window when I was getting Shiva ready to go to the airport. And Shiva has the window down, and all of a sudden there's over $200 in his lap. And Shiva says, "I don't need this, brother." He grabs up the money, he throws it out the window, rolls up the window and looks at me and says, "Now I'm going to have to apologize to him." That was Shiva. One day, we had an exuberant lady, I think from Georgia, and she was tall, beautiful, probably in her early 50s. And I was talking to Lexi for just a minute when Shiva came in, and Lexi goes over to Shiva, and he goes, "My name is Lexi, what's yours?" And Shiva immediately went over and says, "Dyslexy." That was Shiva. So we're all going to miss Shiva, but his spirit's going to live on. And I thank you very much.
Neil Miller.
This is what Shiva gave me. Play these in front of people so they could feel it inside them, the Spirit. He said it's okay for me to stand in front of people and play ball. I thank him for getting me out of my closet and into the world with you. Namaste. You can feel it. You can feel it when you're with him. Our walks and talks.
Thank you to Neil Miller. Stephen Fisk.
Whenever we had an interfaith event, Swami Shiva would always be there with his guitar. So I brought mine today. And I heard him sing a lot of songs. But the one he loved the most, I think, that he sang the most, was about the light. This little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. So I'll be brief and invite you to sing along. You can hear me pretty well, I think. Thank you so much. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. For all my brothers and sisters, to all my brothers and sisters, I'm gonna let it shine. Ooh, for all my brothers and sisters, I'm gonna let it shine. All my brothers and sisters, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. All over the world. All over the world. I'm gonna let it shine. All over the world. I'm gonna let it shine. All over the world. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. And he's shining. Feel that shine in everyone who's come forth today and spoken and shared love of Shiva. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Thank you.
Lift it up. Your heart is in the light now. Captured, cleansed, and called. Called now to the holy clearing. Shed now of this shawl. Shown the way to enter. Shed now of this mortal ceiling, lifted up to thy holy healing, immersed in your center, centered in your luminescence, cast into your stream, shone through the deepest darkness, sealed now in your beam, shining now in revelation, awakening your light to one and all, called now to liberation, captured, cleansed, and called.
Thanks to the Reverend Stephen Fisk. Now I'll invite Felice Willett and the Willett family to share their thoughts.
We knew him as Doug Blue. I met Doug Blue while at Fairfax High School in 1979. I had a wonderful art teacher, Jim Nastasia, who invited me to an art exhibit he was having. A friend of Jim's, I met Doug there at the reception. At the time, our family's home in the heart of West Hollywood had become a salon of sorts for creative, curious, and eclectic characters. I didn't hesitate to bring home people I thought my parents would be interested in meeting and exploring ideas with. So Doug Blue showed up one day and stayed firmly planted in our lives ever since. He introduced us to his dear friends Cindy and Steve Sawyer from Kentucky, who you heard from, who ended up living in our guest cottage and became part of our extended family over the years. Personally, Doug became a source of inspiration, wisdom, and insight at a pivotal time in my teenage years. I had my sights on moving to New York, applying for design school, and starting a career there. Doug gave me lessons on the writings of Socrates and Greek ideals and spoke of how they celebrated the human body through athletics and dance and artistic expression. We also had lengthy discussions about the concept of androgyny and how one could balance or integrate both feminine and masculine qualities into their persona, which I explored for a school report on the subject. He coached me in writing my essays for college. Later, he wrote to me while I lived in New York, always so incredibly supportive and inspiring of the ideals he espoused. Never a judgment or cautionary tale. Doug had an almost ever-present beaming smile and a joyous laughter, as we all know, and came from a higher place so pure. If I had ever doubted there was a God, he proved time and time again that God's Spirit was coming straight through him loud and clear. After returning from New York, I was comforted to see his friendship with my mother and how he had become an important figure in our family, an extended family over the years. His passion for capturing the magic of the moment with photography was infectious. He comforted us when my grandma passed, joining our family for her memorial, which is a lasting memory I have of him, both playful and joyous as an excitable child, while so generously sharing his deep wisdom. He connected with such pure grace, enthusiasm, and love. He often expressed his gratitude to me for introducing him to my world, but I don't think I ever thanked him properly for the role he played in my life over the 45 years, and I'm sad for that. More recently, he gifted me a subscription to Architectural Digest, which at first I thought, this is kind of odd. But I realize now it was his way, once again, of quietly sending me the message to strive for the highest ideals I could in my work. I realize now that the utopian ideals I heard him speak of over the course of 45 years were not so much a luxury pie-in-the-sky concept, but necessary for all of us to work towards right now as we face these existential crises of our time. Doug Blue, I will always hold you near and dear to my beating heart. Thank you. Beautiful.
Dougie. Dougie is who we called Shiva. Was and will continue to be our bonus family member. He landed as if by saucer from another place one day to our bustling home in West Hollywood and forever left an indelible mark. His 3D photographs added another dimension to our personal and company families, attending to our home births and birthdays and days of passing on. He found our homes throughout our 40-plus year relationship a safe place, a place where he was part of our growing family and where he could also express his own childlike place. His light shone like the brightest star in the heavens, sometimes blinding out every bit of interference to our own fear, sadness, and doubt. In keeping the faith and living his spirit, we bid farewell to Dougie, the Willett family.
Dougie just always appeared at those moments. It's those moments of somebody passing or a birth, my first child, my son's birth, and Dougie appeared at the hospital after, as soon as he was born. And then he was there at his first birthday and second birthday, and he was just a light that just shone at each of those moments. It was like it was so powerful to have him there during these pivotal moments in our lives. And my husband, who did not get to spend his whole life with him as I did, immediately felt his love. And just as we left today, he said, I love him. I've always loved him. He's so, so special. And that's what Dougie did. It was so clear to feel his love and his joy in seconds. And it was always right to have him there. It was always felt so right. And thank you so much, Dougie, for being there during those moments. It was always a gift of his photography, and he always came full circle. It was he always came full circle and came back with a beautiful book of all the photographs he took at my son's first birthday. And it was unexpected, but it closed the circle, and he made sure there was something that I could hold from it, a gift from him, and I'm very grateful that he was able to pass that gift on unexpectedly at each one of those moments throughout my life. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Dougie, sure glad we all gathered here to say hello to you and acknowledge how you have affected so many people, and in my case, my family. Oh my God, Doug, I never got enough time to thank you for the things you did. And I guess it's kind of an interesting situation in a memorial where you feel like you just didn't have enough time to say the things you wanted to say. There were things that were undone. That's a sign of a great person. You just never can quite thank them enough. And so, Doug, thank you for watching over my family when I was so distracted in my business and things like that. I just kind of felt you had my back. And God bless you. Take a look at this. You certainly did. And we love you. And our life would be so much smaller if you hadn't been there. Thank you, Doug. I love you, buddy.
Could we have your names, please?
My name is Boyd Willett.
Bonnie.
This is Bonnie.
Bonnie and Felice.
Felice.
And I'm Harper.
And I'm Ruth. I'm another adopted member of this family.
Yes, right.
I'm going to tell you the last time I saw Doug, and then this will. And it kind of, I saw him at elder care. And I came with an agenda, to see Doug in his transitioning days. And when I arrived after doing a COVID test, putting on a hazmat suit, and coming really encumbered to see Doug, who is this free spirit, I met him, and today I understood why I met who I met. He had an agenda. He was transitioning, and he was on that course to leave his body. I was on the course to hold on, to share my love and to share memories with him. But that's not who I met. I met, I guess, the real Swami and the Shiva, who today I understood why. And he had me send a message to, I believe you probably, of something he needed to complete before he could let go of this body. This is, and I had this conversation that I wanted to have with him, but it was like the part of Doug that when you wanted to tell him his problems, it was like, well, hold on. After he wrote this down, and I was sent on a mission to complete his task of helping him release his body. I went to say to him, we all love you. And he was like, oh, I know that, it was almost like, I've been living that, Did you get it, And this is what I finally got today, how important his life and who he is in us, and to live it. And today I put on the essential oil of joy, and I thought it's a little odd, for a funeral or a memorial, but it isn't, because that's who he was, and that's who his essence is, and that's what we connected to and what we remembered when we saw Doug, is that joy that lives in us, our North Star, that we need to nurture. So thank you for that reminder.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to all of us for sharing a part of our Swami's life that we didn't know. Nalini, the switch.
Hi, my name is Nalini Lazowitz, so happy to be here. I came to this center as a high school senior, Hollywood High School in 1971, and things were rough with my family. A divorce, my father was gone now, and my little sister required a lot more time than the older ones, so I was adrift. And I have to say, meeting Sudhir on Hollywood Boulevard at Gallery Rabindra was a turning point in my life. Invited me to the temple. And from then on, for the next 50 years, Shiva has been almost like a Where's Waldo in my life. Like every important activist movement and spiritual celebration and all the plays that we put on here and the choir that I was a member of off and on for years, Shiva's always been there. And I have to start out today with an apology. Shiva asked me a couple of years ago to write down a little paragraph of what Vedanta means to me. And I should have been able to come up with that. And I ran into him a little while back and I said, Shiva, I owe you this paragraph. But the problem was that it was only one word. And that was that Vedanta was my anchor. And he was one of the mentors, the teachers that showed me the embodiment of my spiritual self. So full of joy. He brought to life the Ramakrishna's picture when he's standing in ecstasy. That was Shiva to me. I saw him in so many moments of that joy. And one of them I want to share. We were, this was back in probably 1972. Shiva arranged for Swami Atmatattwananda, who had just come to our center, to visit a Baptist church downtown LA. And it was an evening service, and the minister spoke, the choir celebrated, and then they invited Swami Atmatattwananda to give a blessing. And he got up there, and he had a very high voice, so his Om was very light and beautiful, and the organist found the note, and the vibration filled the temple or the church. And he gave a Sanskrit chant, and then he translated it. And at the end of this moment, the minister said, I didn't understand half of what was said, but I feel it in my bones. I feel the Spirit. I feel Jesus, he's here, he's here. And of course, all of the Vedanta devotees started going, into our own moment of bliss, and the temple there, the church kind of burst out into the same chant, I feel him, it's real, it's real. So this was Shiva's influence on me, and I just am so happy to all the Swamis and all the nuns, all the devotees who keep this beautiful temple alive and help us remember who we are. Jai Ma.
Thank you, Nalini. Was there anyone who we had left out who had signed up for remarks? Oh, Eric.
Years ago, here at the temple, I was visiting, and I would pitch in and help out here and there. And I was in the monastery, and Shiva had been traveling. He was flying back, and whatever arrangements there were to have him picked up and met at the airport couldn't happen. I don't know, maybe the temple car hadn't come back, or I don't know. So one of the monks asked me, Eric, can you go to Burbank? I was like, oh boy, this is this is going to be a fun task, you know. I get to surprise Shiva because he's probably expecting one of his brother monks, you know, to be there, or so I don't really know what the meaning of this story is, but I just always remember it. I go to Burbank Airport, I go into the gate, and in those days, you know, you could meet people right at the gate. There wasn't that much security concern. And at Burbank Airport, you might know, they just kind of wheel this stairway up to the plane, and you walk out, you know, in broad daylight onto the tarmac, and kind of old airport style. So I was inside the gate, behind this darkened glass, because it's so bright outside and in Burbank, and it was a sunny day, and I'm in the gate area with maybe 30 to 50 people just inside, and I was a little concerned because I didn't know, like, if some people were coming off the plane and coming into the gate area, and I hadn't seen Shiva yet, and so I went around the whole group of people that was gathered there, all the way over off to the side, over by the window, and I looked out till I could see the airplane, and there he is. He steps off the airplane, he's at the top of the stairway to go down, and he turns around and waves right at me, and his eyes are just like, "Hey, Eric." You know, he's completely outside, and I'm behind this dark glass, physically invisible, and he just nailed me, and waving high. He's so happy to see me, but he can't see me. I don't know how he did it. I just don't know how he did it.
The length of this service is testament to how deeply Shiva touched all our lives. And he was the one who would come up at the end of a service. After everyone had spoken and no one was left, he would come up, and then he would lean over the podium and he would speak for a long time. So I'm not going to do that, but I am going to read the Memories of Shiva by Carl Whitmarsh, former president of the Vedanta Society, who is now in Ireland. How wonderful you are all gathered here today to honor Shiva. Many years ago, when I was living at the Hollywood Monastery, Jnana said to me, "You know, Shiva doesn't have a whole lot of useful work to do. You two seem to get along pretty well. Think of some way he can help you out." In those days, I was Nitya's assistant at Vedanta Press. Every few months, we would import a big shipment of books and incense from India by ship, dozens of crates. A broker would arrange for their transport from the docks at San Pedro to Vedanta Press. I said to Shiva, "Let's take the monastery pickup truck down to the docks and bring up the crates ourselves. We'll save the Vedanta Society a whole lot of money that way." Shiva leapt at the idea, and we set out enthusiastically. But when we got to the docks, we realized we hadn't thought about how we would actually load these very heavy crates onto the truck. I was in a panic. Shiva was totally calm. There were a bunch of burly longshoremen standing nearby, looking at us with unconcealed suspicion. Shiva waved to them, made light conversation, and before you knew it, we were all best buddies, and the longshoremen were loading the crates onto our truck. As we drove back up the harbor freeway, the truck swerved erratically under the unexpected weight of the crates. My nerves were on edge the whole time. Shiva, too, was fully aware of the danger, but he was unconcerned. He was brimming with delight over the adventure we had shared that day. There's no question Shiva always had a guardian angel. But I was a slow learner in grasping the power of his divine protection. Just a couple of years ago, Shiva and I were traveling from Los Angeles to Dublin on the same day, but had to take different planes. He had to change planes in London. I was so nervous about his safe arrival, I bought him a cell phone so we could keep in touch. At the age of 88, he was struggling to master it before we left. This was not reassuring. But sure enough, when I got to Dublin Airport, there he was, waiting quietly for me. There had been missteps and confusion along the way, but at every step, he had made a new friend who helped him toward his destination. In our busy and complex lives, we feel we have achieved a lot if now and then we remember the Lord while attending to our needs and the needs of others. But Shiva exemplified a far higher ideal. He lived in total faith that the Lord would protect him. And the proof of that was his mood of continual calm and joy. I am blessed I got to spend so much time with Shiva, and in particular, travel with him. I have a treasure full of memories that I will keep with me for all my life. Like these, for example. As we drove on country roads through tiny Norman villages in the fading ruddy light of October, Shiva talking on 20 different subjects, and then dozing off, still talking into his lovely but incomprehensible fractured French. Arriving at a little hotel, Shiva fussing with sincere delight over the innkeeper's dog, taking endless photos, warm feelings and laughter and a pleasant evening all around. Shiva was not what you would call a linear thinker. When he gave talks on Vedanta, he'd usually jump from topic to topic, interspersing his call to faith with songs on the guitar. I'd often leave the temple not exactly clear as to what the point of his talk was, but certain of one thing: his life was grounded in God, and he wanted us to share his joy in experiencing God directly and intensely. Shiva was so full of joy that as I write these words, I remember him only with joy. Joy that overpowers any possibility of grief. I don't miss him. How can I miss him? He is with me now and forever. Peace, peace, peace. We still have two pre-recorded contributions to listen to, and also George Infante is going to share a brief something with us, and then we'll have the two video presentations followed by the remainder of the service. George?
Hello, everyone. My name is George Infante. You hear my religious name in Tixan Buimong, so that's why I gave just my. I'm here on behalf. First, I met Shiva through Ernie Garcia, who was a resident here, and I'm only grateful that I met Shiva. He was just embodiment of that which is that which cannot be explained. And well, I'm here because he was part of this Suhypra project, which is what he was doing to help us. It's a project in the Amazonian region in Peru. And I'm here on behalf of those native communities to thank the Vedanta monastery, everyone here, and Shiva. And the moment the communities found out that he had passed away, the elders and the masters held a 3-day ceremony for him out in the Amazon. So I'm just here to say thank you to Shiva, and thank you to Vedanta and to everyone here.
Just a moment while we get our technical things lined up.
as you are, beautiful and free. Leave everything aside. Just be, just be. Don't listen to your mind. Ain't got nothing new to say. Be still, hold your ground. It will soon fade away. Time to break your chains, let go of your beliefs, face your fears, observe your pain, but stay as witness, don't interfere. Just come as you are, beautiful and free. Leave everything aside.
Under thy great sky, in solitude and silence, with a humble heart, shall I stand before thee face to face, day after day. O Lord of my life, shall I stand before thee face to face. Shiva, 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 Maha, 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 Deva, 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 Hara, 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 Shiva, 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 Maha, 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 Deva, 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 Hara, 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 oh, oh, oh. In this wondrous world of thine, violent with toil and with struggle among the hurrying crowds, shall I stand before thee face to face with folded hands, O Lord of all worlds, shall I stand before thee face to face. Sing with us, Hara, 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 Shiva, 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 Maha, 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 Deva, Deva, Deva,
Dayo Shanti, Antariksham Shanti, Prithvi Shanti, Apar Shanti, Oshadaya Shanti, Vanaspataya Shanti, Vishwadeva Shanti, Brahma Shanti, Sarvam Shanti, Shantireva, Shanti Samma, Shantir Edi. Peace is in the heavens. Peace is on the earth. Peace is in the waters, the herbs, the grass, the trees are all full of peace. The bright shining ones are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this eternal, universal peace enter our soul and being. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.
A loving tribute to Swami Atmatattwananda. There is one thing certain in this uncertain world. A loving tribute to Swami Atmatattwananda. There is one thing certain in this uncertain world: death. Krishna said in the Gita, to that which is born, death is certain. And to that which is dead, birth is certain. One should not grieve over what is unavoidable. Vedanta teaches the human body dies. But the true nature of the human is the atman, which is immortal. I knew Shiva, Swami Atmatattwananda, over a period of 50 years, from the time I first arrived in the United States in 1971. We lived in a monastery of Hollywood for nearly 7 years. He was a voracious reader. When I started to speak in public, I asked him to correct my lectures. He took notes on my Sunday lectures and classes, then corrected my pronunciation and grammar. He also supplied many references when I needed. I am ever grateful to him. Prabhupada introduced regular meditation for the monks and nuns 3 times a day. I always saw Shiva in the Hollywood shrine. In 1971, 8 brothers received brahmacharya vows. All of the brahmacharis put on a kopin and a white dhoti. And I had a hard time tying the dhoti around the waist of Shiva. It will go down. Then I tied with a rope, with a string around his waist so his cloth will not drop. And all laughed. That is our Shiva. In 2005, at the Vedanta Society of St. Louis, we wanted to produce a documentary video on the parables of Sri Ramakrishna. So we asked Shiva to provide the commentary. He wrote these parables with tremendous passion. And his voice still resonates in my ears. Shiva had a big heart. He always rushed to help people who were sick, poor, or depressed, as well as foreigners who are struggling in this country. A sadhu is judged by his character. Shiva has a stainless character and was a wonderful sadhu. There is a saying in the monastic community, people glorify a monk when his ashes from the funeral pyre fly, thus declaring his purity. Shiva was such a monk of the Ramakrishna order. Beautiful soul. I want to, when I went to Hollywood last time to give a lecture, I heard that he was in the hospital. I wanted to go to see him, but I heard that he does not want to see anybody. He was in silence. But really, he is really a wonderful soul. We shall miss him. Thank you very much.
We somehow failed to read out the reminiscences here, the message of Prabhakar Kaluskar, or Pai. In Swami Atmatattwananda's passing, I have lost my best friend, an older brother disciple, a most caring companion, a guide in several ways, and so much more. When I first met him in March 1966, he was on crutches, and on seeing him, I exclaimed, "Hop along, Cassidy," after a TV show comedian. With a good laugh began a friendship which has lasted 55 years until death did us part. Many have been the shared experiences and activities with him over this long period, mostly in Southern California. One of the most important of these for me was as fellow members of the Hollywood Men's Choir. A memorable visit was a camping trip that he, Charles Carter, and I made into the Oregon Mountains in 1970, looking for Bigfoot. We found only footprints, but immensely enjoyed the camping. In 1990, he visited and stayed with us for 11 days in the ancient holy city of Nasik, near Mumbai, in India. Together, we visited some important places in the city, namely Ram and Sita Kund and Triambakeshwar temple. Not far from the city, we visited Shirdi, where the saint Sri Sai Baba, contemporary of Sri Ramakrishna, had lived. Shiva had helped me refresh my modest singing skills from time to time. The last time he did this was on 30th May 2019, when I was in Hollywood and he sang "We Are One," while at the same time strumming on his guitar. Respectful pranams, Prabhakar Kaluskar. Lights, please.
So it was just a few weeks ago I had the incredible pleasure and honor of being in Shiva's space and shared this song, to which first strum he began to conduct from his bed, looking up into the heavens, a moment I will never forget, surely consciously and passionately co-creating his transition. I celebrate his spirit is so vibrant and here with us. I love you, Shiva, so much.
Krishna.
The surface of the sea rises and sinks alternately, but to the observant soul, each sinking reveals more and more of the depth and of the treasures that lie hidden at the bottom. Coming and going is pure delusion. The soul never comes or goes. Where is the place it shall go when all space is in the soul? When shall be the time for entering and departing when all time is in the soul? Nature is always moving, changing, lifting veil after veil, turning over leaf after leaf of its great book, while the witnessing soul drinks in knowledge, unmoved and unchanged. All souls that ever have been, are, or shall be, are all in the present tense. They are all standing, as it were, at one geometrical point. The idea of space does not occur to the soul. Therefore, all that were ours are ours, and always will be ours. They are always with us, and we are in them. They are in us. Each soul is like a star, and all stars are set in that infinite sky, which is the Lord. In him is the root, the reality, the real individuality of each and all of us. Religion began with the search for some of those stars that had passed beyond our horizon. It ended with finding them all in God and ourselves in the same place. Our friend has given up the old garment he was wearing and is now standing where he always was through all eternity. Will he manifest another such garment in this or any world? I sincerely pray that he will not, until he does so in full consciousness. I pray that no one may be dragged anywhere by the unseen powers of past actions. I pray that all may be free and have the knowledge of that freedom. But if they are to dream again, let us pray that their dreams will all be of peace and bliss. May the Lord bless thee and keep thee. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. From the unreal, lead Shiva to the real. From darkness, lead him to light. From death, lead him to immortality. Light him through and through, and guide him evermore with thy loving presence. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. Peace, peace, peace.
Now for the closing song. This is the end. There's a couple of announcements. After the service, we are distributing prasad packets. We wish we could invite you into the monastery to enjoy refreshments together, but for our safety and all of your safety, we're not going to do that. But we have packets outside with some goodies, and there's ice cream. Shiva loved ice cream, so we have ice cream and samosas and nuts and juice. And there's also a table of mementos. These are personal effects of his. Photographs, some items of clothing and other music and things like that he had. And we invite you to take something that may be meaningful for you. And now Mirabai and Riley and Nalini and Swami Atmatattwananda will close with Peter's beautiful song.
And Shiva very often sang this with us. Take this part.
If you can remember the lyrics, the chorus repeats, and you're welcome to sing along. It's every river from a mountain flows to end up as the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee.
I don't know, where should I sing in this one?
Yeah, you can sing. I wanted the guitar.
One, two, three.
Every river from a mountain flows to end up as the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee. Confucius was a truthful man who had a plan. Give to others what you'd love to take from every hand. Every river from a mountain flows to end up at the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee. Moses was the first to know there's but one God to love. He came here to bring this light of knowledge from above. Every river from a mountain flows to end up at the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee.
Buddha was a blessed one who made his mind so small. Now he sits in bliss and gives his blessings to us all.
Every river from a mountain flows to end up at the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee.
Jesus was a gentle son whose father was above. Now is he a risen one and shows the way to God.
Every river from a mountain flows to end up at the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee. Young Mohammed on a mountain heard a different call, just to sing the praise of Allah, knowing God is all. Every river from a mountain flows to end up as the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee. Krishna, the shepherd boy, played his flute all day. Till the night he played a thief and stole your heart away. Every river from a mountain flows to end up as the sea. All faith, love, and all we know will all end up in thee. And every river and every dream is one with you. Like every dreamer in every dream, I run to you. Every dreamer from a mountain flows.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Shiva. Because today we really felt, as participants in that great life that was Shiva, sometimes it takes a little distance to have a correct perspective. When you're too close to someone like Shiva, You don't see that magnitude, that glory, or that personality. I tell you, Shiva is going to grow in our lives. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Thank you.
Sure. No, it was not I just very brief excuse from